Good morning and welcome to OPCC. Welcome to those of you joining online. We're glad you're here today. If you have your Bibles, you can turn to Matthew chapter 17 or Mark chapter 9 or Luke chapter 9. I don't care. I won't be reading any of those, but I'll be talking about all of them, okay? So today's story is a little interesting, and there are several different angles. Mark's actually is the one I'll be talking to you about from the story, and so you can look at it, read it, and check and see how I do, but I think I'm going to be pretty solid in my memory of it. How many of you are the youngest child? Bless your hearts. I was the youngest child for 11 years. And then my parents had a surprise baby. And so I got to be both a baby for a while and an older brother. There's 18 years between my oldest brother and my youngest brother. And so I remember my older brothers were 6 and 7 years older than me. I was born in 1970. Fantastic year. Like, it's an amazing year to come into the world. Really cool things happening. Some of the music was amazing then. Some of it toward the latter part of the 70s was weird, referring to disco music. But there's some good classic rock there in the 70s. That's not what this sermon's about. But my brothers, being 6 and 7 years older than me, I was at an age when they were, 12 or so. They were at an age where they could go out and do things. And I was at an age where I was old enough to go, but not cool enough, right? And so sometimes they would take me, but most of the time they would not. And I would get infuriated. Didn't any of you guys have that happen to you? Oh, yeah, poor guy. I feel for you, bro. We can get together and have coffee and talk about it sometime. But I remember that was just getting left behind. It was just such a miserable experience. One time, I was the first time, like I can remember vividly. And some of you have been around here before or for a while may have heard this story. But my brother, he can't remember this story. But when I was probably 5 or 6 years old, pretty young, they were going somewhere, and my oldest brother told my mom, "No, we don't want him to go. He can't come." And they left. Now, my oldest brother, he went into the field of design, like drafting and stuff like that. He was always really good at drawing things and just making cool things like that. And so even at a young age, he kind of had a knack for that stuff. And he had taken me out. My dad was into woodworking, and he had taken me out into my dad's shop and taken a piece of plywood, a half a sheet of plywood or so, and taken a bunch of scrap wood and built like a little city on this plywood, like with roads and different buildings with garages and stuff that were different shapes. And I could play with my Hot Wheels on. You know what I'm talking about, guys? Doesn't it sound amazing? Some of you are like, "Oh, yeah." Well, he made that for me. And about the same time that we went out there together and made that project, and he glued everything down, it was on it, and I think we even played with it a little bit that day, and it was like the next day or 2 days after that they went on this excursion and told my mom I couldn't go, and I was furious, and I went out there crying in that shop, and I got me a hammer and I beat that thing to a pulp. I don't remember I just remember being furious as a little bitty kid. And I can remember hitting that thing. It was stupid. Because I didn't get to go and I ruined this thing that I really loved. And so that's kind of what happens to us in moments where we get left behind. And so we looked last week at this whole story. Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up on the Mount of Transfiguration. They get to go up the mountain with him, and he's in a season of prayer, and they see him in all of his glory. He reveals himself to them in a very powerful way. And they're not to talk about it to anyone. They can't even talk to the guys who didn't get to come. They can't talk to anyone until Jesus is crucified. They're to hold this secret that they have experienced with Jesus up on top of the mountain to themselves until after Jesus dies. Well, what are the other 9 guys doing? What are the 9 guys doing that get left behind? Have you ever thought about that? We know exactly what they were doing. As you take the 3 chapters of the 3 different Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, our text today, Matthew chapter 17, Mark chapter 9, and Luke chapter 9, we put them all together and we find out and we get a really good, accurate picture of what these guys were doing. They were down in the valley dealing with a demon-possessed boy. They were down in the valley, and the story tells us that when Jesus and the 3, Peter, James, and John and Jesus come down the mountain, they find the other 9, and they're arguing with the teachers of the law. And so Jesus comes down the mountain to find the other 9 in an argument with the teachers of the law. He comes up on the scene, and he says to all the people see Jesus, they're amazed at Jesus, they're turning their attention to Jesus. He comes up to the situation and he says, "What are you guys arguing about?" And one of the people in the crowd says, "Teacher, I brought my son to you. He is demon possessed and he goes through these fits of convulsions, and I brought him to your disciples to cast out the demon, to heal him, and they couldn't do it." That's what they're arguing about, Jesus. Not a good look for the 9 that were left behind. And Jesus says, "Oh, you perverse and unfaithful generation, how long must I tolerate you?" Jesus is coming from this glorious moment down into this experience where he's watching this happen, and he is critical somewhat of the faith that is being displayed not only by the disciples, but the others in the crowd as well. "Bring the boy to me." They bring the boy. They bring him to Jesus. And when the spirit that is possessing this boy sees Jesus, the text tells us that it caused the boy to go into a convulsion, and he fell on the ground. He rolled around. His mouth started foaming. Probably his eyes rolled back into the head, and something of an epileptic experience. This demon threw him into this convulsion right there in the midst of the crowd. And Jesus says to the Father, "How long has he been like this?" Jesus, now the boy is down there, he's convulsing, he's foaming at the mouth, he's rolling around on the ground out of control, and Jesus starts to have a conversation with the Father. "How long has he been like this?" "Since childhood." It often causes this spirit takes control of him and sometimes causes him to jump into the water. We've had to rescue him from drowning. Sometimes it will cause him, and you see the burns on him, sometimes it will cause him to throw himself into the fire to try to destroy his body. And they would have open fires all the time. That's how they cooked. If you go over into Africa, I've been a couple of times, you'll see a lot of people that have burned, a lot of burned victims. And the reason is when they're small, they've fallen into the fire in the village. And so that's what he says, it will cause him. He's repeatedly thrown himself into the fire when he has one of these experiences. And Jesus looks at the boy and he commands and rebukes and says, "I command you to come out of him and never enter him again." He's dead. The boy is dead, they say. And Jesus bends over to the lifeless body, grabs a hold of his hand. The boy stands to his feet, and he gives him back to his father. And Jesus deals with the demon that day. The scene ends. It doesn't tell us a whole lot about how it ends, except that the next scene, they find themselves in the house. And the 9 disciples ask Jesus, "Why couldn't we cast that demon out?" And Jesus said, "Well, this one comes out by prayer. And if you had faith like a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, 'Move,' and it would move." But that's why you couldn't deal with the demon today. Now, a couple of things about this story as we begin to unpack and what does it mean for us. One, this is some form of physically, this boy, I believe, and most theologians would believe that this boy had some form of epilepsy, okay? But he was also possessed by a demonic spirit. So that there are two things I would say. One is every time somebody has epilepsy, it doesn't mean they're possessed by a demonic spirit. So epilepsy is a normal health condition. But this boy was both. Like since childhood, and he evidently had gotten pretty old because he refers to, he's been like this all his life. We have to watch him 24 hours a day. We never know when it's going to happen. And this thing sends him into a fit of rage, and we can tell something demonic is going on besides some kind of just physical condition. And Jesus doesn't dispute that, and he casts it out. And evidently, if the boy did have epilepsy, he cures that as well. So whatever's going on in this moment is taken care of 100% by Jesus. But what does this mean for us? I don't come across in my life, I have been following Jesus. I believe I am a man of deep and strong faith. I've been following Jesus 30 years. I haven't really come across this. Never had to cast a demon out of anyone. But I feel like there's a lot of demonic activity in the world. And the Lord's never called on me to cast a demon out. I do believe that I have prayed over people and encountered people who were experiencing some demonic activity. I remember one time praying, a kid was like, he was at a church camp. He was older than all the rest of the kids. He came in and he wanted to give his testimony. He talked to me, he talked to the camp director. The camp director let him give the testimony. And so, I don't know, there's probably 80 to 100 kids there. And this kid gets up and starts testifying. He's probably 21, 22 years old. And people are amening him in the crowd. But then he starts saying stuff that is like, that's not right what he just said. He starts saying stuff that doesn't line up with Christianity. Then he starts contradicting the word and starts glorifying and saying things that are not okay for people to do. So the camp director gets up and he goes toward the guy. And as he goes towards the guy walks away from him. And it was such a stark visual for me of a man of God and something evil happening in another person. And like it was resistant. They would come toward him and he would move away like that. And so I was like, and it was weird. And I was like, man, this is going to be confusing for the kids. And I'm watching the camp director. I was like, he needs help. It doesn't appear that anybody else is going to help him. I'm the camp evangelist. I guess I just got voluntold by the Lord to help him. And so when he starts moving toward the kid, and he moves away, I just step up. And I just walk right up to him. I put my arm around him. I say, hey, bud, let's go out, you and me outside and talk. And he's like, okay. And I just take him out the side door, leave the camp director with all the kids. And now I've got this kid out there. And I'm 23. I have no idea what I'm doing, all right? Other than I believe in Jesus. And I start talking to him, and he starts telling me these things. I'm like, well, that's not right what you're saying. And I'm talking to him a little bit, and then as he's kind of argumentative with me, I just open up my Bible and start reading stuff to him. I start reading, well, this is what this says right here. And as I'm reading it to him, his face, like I watched his face go from a kind of a reddish tint to a pale like that. And he looked me in the eyes and said, I got to go. Never saw him again. And that was the closest I think I've ever gotten to what I look at that, and I don't know 100%. Maybe he just came to his senses, but I felt like there was something evil going on in that moment. And that as I spoke the word of God over that individual, that spirit left him, and he came to, and he just wanted to get out of there. And so I say that to say, well, I haven't had a lot of that. I've just not experienced that a ton in my ministry. But I have experienced a lot of dark stuff happening in people's lives. And I do watch the news every night. And it's clear to me there is a lot of evil and demonic stuff going on in the world. And I think that demonic activity is much more sophisticated in our day and time than it was in the time of Christ, because we've had 2,000 years of church history, people walking in the power and demonstration of the Spirit, and I think it has forced the enemy to have to get a little bit more crafty than he probably had to do prior to the time coming of the Holy Spirit in the lives of people. So I just say that to say, look, we're dealing with demonic activity, and it's veiled and we can't see it all the time. And there's stuff where I think the enemy is working in our midst and trying to trip us up in very powerful ways in our relationships with other people. So as we look at this story, I think what we're going to see, what the Lord has shown me, is it's not so much about what is going on with this demon as about what is going on with these 9 disciples. Because that's where the power is really going to be rooted in the situation. We have a vacancy of power among these 9 who are not able to do this. So we must ask the question, what in the world was going on here? They themselves even asked that question. And so I'm going to give you 3 takeaways and a big idea, and I think they're going to be encouraging to you, and I hope they are as encouraging to you as they have been to me. I walk in this stuff. I walk in it daily. I share it with people, and I shared it with a few people this week. I was sharing my experience with them about how I'm walking with the Lord and how He's moving, and the same thing is available to you. And I think that's what's going to make us a very powerful church in this community, is when we all start walking in this stuff that I'm going to teach you today, that I think Jesus is trying to get the disciples and the church to know. And here's the first one. Live by faith, not by sight. You have to intentionally be a person who lives by faith and not by your eyesight. The 9 had the authority to cast out the demon, but they were unable. Jesus, remember, we learned this a few weeks ago or a few months ago, Jesus sent them out. And they came back rejoicing that the evil spirits were subject to them. And they were amazed by it. So they, in the past, have cast out demons just like Jesus did this day. But in this moment, they were unable to do it, something they had done in the past. And I believe that they could not do it because they started walking by sight and quit walking by faith. What does it mean to walk by sight? To walk by sight is to walk in the flesh. So when you walk in the flesh, you are walking by what you can see happening around you instead of what you cannot see. And when you start to walk that way, then you end up manifesting the deeds of the flesh. Well, what are the deeds of the flesh? Well, turn over to Galatians chapter 5, I believe it is. Yeah, Galatians 5. You there? That's okay, I'll read it to you. Galatians 5:13. Listen to this. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free. That's your salvation. You're called into freedom. But do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. If you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. So I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh. They are in conflict with each other so that you are not to do whatever you want. In other words, there's going to be some things that your flesh desires to do, but you're not to do them if you're going to walk in the Spirit. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Okay, what are the acts of the flesh? Well, Paul says the acts of the flesh are obvious. Sexual immorality. What is that? That is heterosexuality, homosexuality, bisexuality, anything sexual outside of the bonds of marriage. That's a deed of the flesh. Impurity and debauchery. We are not to be impure or involved in debauchery. All right, I can I'm feeling pretty good about myself right now. Are you guys feeling pretty good right now? Jealousy. No, wait. Yeah. Idolatry. Okay. Still doing pretty good. Witchcraft. Okay. Hatred. Anybody you hate? Discord. Discord. Jealousy. Fits of rage. Selfish ambition. Dissensions. Orgies, and the like. I think what we tend to do is take the front one and the back one and forget everything in the middle and go, I'm doing all right. What is a dissension? I think a dissension is an argument that leads to division. And I say that I think these guys were not able to do it is because I think they were upset that they were left behind and they started focusing on themselves, that it wasn't fair that Peter, James, and John got to go up the mountain and we had to stay down here. And the reason that I say that, there's a couple of reasons. One is they end up in an argument with people, which is a deed of the flesh. They end up in a dissentious and contentious experience with people. They are unable to access the authority that they should have been able to access. And just in the very next week or so, we will learn as they're walking along the road, they're talking amongst themselves about who's the greatest in the kingdom. And so it's on their minds. Peter's name has just been changed. How would you feel, man? Your buddy, you're both like becoming friends with somebody who's super famous, and the super famous guy changes your buddy's name. We're not going to call you Peter anymore. We're going to call you the Rock. Right? What about me? We're still going to call you Jimmy. Right? That's what they're dealing with this. And I think it's intentional. I think Jesus leaves the 9 down in the valley and takes the 3 up on the top. One, for the miracle to be revealed to them so that they would have this information going forward. But I think 2, to show them something very important. He talks to them about their faith, and it feels like he's condemning them for their lack of faith. But I think what he is doing is teaching them how important faith was to their ministry in the future. He's saying, look, you've got to understand, I've been teaching you about faith for the last 2 years, 2.5 years, and I'm about to leave. And you need to understand how important faith is in your life, how important of a role that it plays. So what is faith? Well, faith is believing in what we cannot see. So we are saved by grace through what? Faith. We're saved in the grace of God that is available to us, believing in a supernatural grace that Jesus purchased on the cross of Calvary. We believe that we receive that grace when we believe that Jesus rose from the dead. We can't see that. None of us have seen that. We're believing in faith. We know that there's evidence. There's historical evidence of testimony, eyewitness testimony. It's not like a blind leap in the dark, but at the end of the day, we come to a place where we are trusting in something we cannot see. So whenever the Lord takes us on this journey and takes these guys and teaches them this and focuses in this moment on the idea of faith, we need to understand that we come into the kingdom in faith, but we're supposed to live in faith. We're supposed to be walking in faith all the time. We don't just walk in faith when we feel guilty over our sin and we need a little forgiveness because we're experiencing some condemnation from ourselves. No, we walk in faith when we're like every day, every moment of the day, every minute of the day, we're just walking in faith. And these guys, I think, fail to do that, and they get into this place of an argument with these guys. And Jesus says to them, unbelieving generation. What is that? It is the Greek word apistos, and it means without trust in Jesus. You guys have quit trusting in me because you couldn't see me. Now, Peter, James, and John, they're probably coming down from the mountain thinking, no, we could take care of that demon ourselves. because they just come off of a high. And Jesus definitely deals with the demon, but these other guys were left behind in the moment, and they quit walking in faith. Our greatest obstacle in life as believers is trusting instead of being distracted by the physical things that we can see. Trusting that the Lord will work in a moment when you're having conflict with someone in your family. Trusting that the Lord will work in a moment when you're having conflict with a coworker. Trusting that the Lord will work in a moment when you're worried about something financially. Trusting that the Lord will work in a moment, whatever, fill in the blank. Is trusting in Jesus in those moments. And what happens is the enemy gets us distracted by the things that we can see with our physical eyes, and we are tempted to take a hold of things and really make a mess of stuff. To live by faith is to wait on Jesus and trust in what you cannot see. It is to be comfortable putting yourself in a scenario, being in the scenario, not putting yourself in a scenario, but finding yourself in a scenario where you know that something needs to be done, but you're not sure what to do, so you trust in Jesus in the interim and wait and see what he says before you start to do. That's what the Lord calls us, to walk in faith. That's what it means to walk in faith. There are times in my life where I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I just trust in the Lord, and I just am in this season, and I'm trying to figure it out, but I don't walk by sight. What does it mean to walk by sight? To walk by sight is to take hold of something by force without his help. So to walk by sight is to well, this needs to be dealt with. I'm going to deal with it right now, and go just put your hands on it. This happens for me and plays out for me all the time. All the time. It happens for me as a parent. It happens for me as a pastor. It happens for me as a friend. It's happened to me for my kids. As a pastor, and you're trying to teach your kids how to follow Jesus, it's really tempting from time to time to tell them, hey, well, you can't do this because I'm a pastor, or you can't do this because we are followers of Jesus. It's very tempting. Sometimes I find myself being worried about decisions that I see that they are making that are not good for them as a disciple. And as a pastor, what am I to do in those moments? Well, part of me wants to just tear in and say, look, we need to talk. What you're doing is stupid, and you need to quit doing it. To which they would be like, you're stupid. They might not say that, but that's exactly what they would be thinking. And so what do? I just pray. I just talk to the Lord, and I wait. I wait in the moment. So to walk by sight is to go in and grab a hold of something and do it before the timing is right with the Lord. And so the Lord tells us in this story, let's go on. I'm going to come back to that. The Lord tells us in this story, the second thing, we are more than able to do what Jesus once done. So I'm more than able to be the father, to be the pastor, to be the friend, to accomplish the things that Jesus wants to do in my life. We are all more than able to do that. The guy says to Jesus, the father says, if you can, help us, please help us. And Jesus is like, if you can, the boy is rolling around in a mess right now. If you can, everything is possible for the one who believes. The words that Jesus uses here are the words dunamai, pisteo, dunatos. Okay, I won't make you say them today. But what do they mean? Well, in this context, if you do the interpretation on them, they basically mean the power to trust in Jesus to do something. You become powerful by trusting that he is able to help you do something. Dunamai, pisteuo, dunatos. You need to get good at saying that to yourself. Because what you are already good at is putting your hands on something before you should. And if you would put yourself in a position where you will trust Jesus to help you and show you what to do in the midst of it. You will walk by faith and you will wait to do something until you know this is what we're supposed to do. And so this story is not so much about casting out demons as it is dealing with difficulty. This was a difficult situation for them. And the situation was happening to them. And the reason they couldn't cast the demon out is because they did not have any power, because they were walking in the flesh instead of the spirit. And the difficult situation put them in the wrong spot because they had the wrong mindset. And so how do we deal with difficulties? Well, Jesus tells them prayer is how we deal with our difficulties. He says, if you have faith like a mustard seed, you can move mountains. What is a mustard seed kind of faith? It is the kind of faith that is put into the ground and it changes and grows into something. It is constantly growing. Mustard seed faith is not the faith that you had when you became a Christian a long time ago. Mustard seed faith is not the faith that where you got baptized a long time ago. Mustard seed faith is always growing in the garden of God and becoming a tree. It never stops growing. So it is active. And it sprouts out of the ground and it keeps moving and it keeps walking in life by faith, not by the things I can see, but by the things I cannot see, believing that the things I cannot see will come and help me with the things that I can see relationally. They'll help me in my relationships with people, help me in my relationship with conflict, which is really where most of our misery comes from. If you stop and think about it. Most of our problems have to do with people. That people aren't acting a way we think they should, or we're not in relationally, we're not, like it's a lot of our joy gets robbed in those relationships. The Bible even says that the devil himself tries to gain a foothold on them. He tries to trip us up in that place. And so we are called to be people of prayer in this place of growing active faith. Why couldn't we deal with the difficulty, Jesus? Prayer. Your faith wasn't growing and you weren't engaged in faith in this moment. You were focused on yourself and talking to other people about the problem instead of me, and that's why you're in these arguments. The word that he uses for prayer here is the word prosuke, and it means a place to set apart for prayer. When we become people who actually pray about the difficulties in our lives, we will start to see the mountains move. Now, Jesus obviously wasn't saying literally that when we become people of faith, we can say to the mountain, move mountain. It's a saying, like it's how you deal with your difficulties. So there are always going to be difficulties in your life, but when you become a person who walks by faith, you become a person who prays and talks to Jesus, and then Jesus opens up a door of opportunity for you to walk through, and then you see the mountain moved. So here's the big idea. When battles are won on the mountain, work gets done in the valley. Jesus went up the mountain before this, and if you read all three accounts of the Transfiguration, he is in a season of prayer. And one of them, as he's praying, the disciples, Peter, James, and John, kind of wake up, just like they do in the Garden of Gethsemane, and they see Jesus in his glorified state. So Jesus is praying up on the mountain. Then he comes down into the valley to do the work of dealing with the demonic. That's the rhythm. Don't do anything in the valley with sight. Do everything in the valley in faith. So I go back to these moments where I was talking about giving my kids an illustration of my kids. They're dating somebody they shouldn't be dating. They're dating an unbeliever. How am I going to talk to them about that? Just pray. And the more you pray, the more you'll see the Lord work. And then all of a sudden, the door will open. I've had dreams about people that I know the Lord wanted me to talk to. Dreams that have bothered me, dreams that have made me worried that if I talk to them, it might hurt the relationship. I carried them around for months. What do? Believe the Lord is at work in it. and just keep praying and walking with the Lord and keep praying and talking to the Lord about it and keep walking in faith, believing that that dream that he gave you meant something. And all of a sudden, man, the door will just poof, fling wide open, and you'll find yourself in the conversation, and you'll find that Jesus is already there. And you didn't put your hands on it before you were supposed to, and now it becomes something beautiful instead of a moment of dissension when you're walking in the flesh. I've had it happen with staff members. I've had it happen with it happens all the time. And so I find myself in these moments where I'm really encouraged when stuff like this starts to happen, because I see the Lord work in it. And when we become a church that is filled with people who pray, we will do something powerful. If I'm committed to anything else, the two things that I'm committed to as a minister of the gospel is praying and preaching the word as the Lord speaks to me about what he wants me to teach you. And I want to see you be people of prayer. And some of you are, man. Some of you, the Lord has already set your heart on fire. And that's why we're seeing a lot of momentum and movement in this church, because what we're trying to do is different than what is being done in most places. We're not just trying to be like the coolest church or the most creative church. We're trying to teach people how to follow Jesus. We're teaching the word, telling you to yield to the lordship of Christ. For 15 years, I've been praying about the land across the street. 15 years. The intensity of that prayer has gone up as time has passed. A few years ago, we were given a very generous gift, which put us financially in a very strong position. We're sitting on about $1.4 million. And I was praying and talking to the Lord and been sharing it with the leadership team for some time. And we thought last year we would try to make a move. Like maybe it's time to start exploring the possibility. The Lord said, wait. You need to take care of the staff. By taking care of the staff, we needed the right staff, the right team, the right shepherds in the church. So we just embarked on a year journey of praying and talking to the Lord. Lord, send us the right people. And it took forever. It's so frustrating, but you just keep walking in faith. And the Lord sent us Matt. Matt's story is incredible. It's an incredible story. Like the week that one of our members reached out to him, he had the Lord tell him that a church was in need of a pastor and they will reach out to you. And so the Lord used one of you guys to reach out to him, and I just happened to be in the truck with him that day when it all came together. And that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, walking in faith, praying and talking to the Lord. And so we got all that taken care of. We've got our staff lined out now. We've got Atticus on board and beginning to take over the youth ministry. We think we have a plan for executive pastor as we continue to grow. We think that's an important piece of the puzzle. And so we think the Lord may have, be fixing some of that and answering that as we move forward. But here we are a year later, still sitting on $1.4 million, and the church is growing. Momentum has been reestablished. Now, you have to understand, I'm talking to the Lord every day and asking him to give us that land. I've had people tell me they've had visions about the land. Some of you have come and shared your visions with me, and then other visions I've heard that haven't been told to me directly, but that have been told and shared with somebody else before the people even got to the church. And I'm beginning to think, man, the Lord is doing something here. Like, you can't make this stuff up. And I think one day you're going to hear about all these stories, okay? This week I pulled in on the church having no idea that I would do this. No idea. I pulled into the church on Tuesday, and the Lord said, call that number. Now, I've been looking at that number on that sign for years. And I called, and within 15 minutes, the owner called me back. I said, are you a real estate agent? No, I'm the owner. And I started asking questions. But we're asking $4.3 million. Right now, there is a convenience store, a gas station, and a liquor store under due diligence for lot 1 and lot 2, which are the 2 lots on the south end right across the street from our church, right on Metcalf. This week, like in the next day or two, there are things going before the city council. But I said, well, is this locked down? Is this deal locked? Like, is it set in stone? Well, it's really far along, but it's not set in stone. I said, well, we're interested in all of it. We don't want just lot 1 and 2. We want every lot. I said, I'd like for you to send me the stuff. So he sent me the stuff. I talked to the advisory board. I talked to Quentin, our treasurer. I said, I need you to reach out to the bank. He reached out to the bank. The bank scheduled a meeting with us, and we had a phone conference with them on Thursday or Friday. I don't remember what it was. They're looking at all our numbers, our financials. I said, we just want to know, where are we at? And so from what they're comfortable with and looking at where we're at, we're somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 and $2 million shy of really being in a position to where we would still be stepping out in faith. Now I'm sure there's somebody out there that would loan us the money. But I look at that and say, well, what? I'm kind of excited because we're in a position that we can't deal with it. It's a difficulty that requires the Lord do something. So I didn't get discouraged. I'm actually excited because I know if that ground is ours, there's nothing going to take it away from us. And if it's not, I don't want it. And I also know the church is growing, and I know I've been praying, and I've watched the Lord over my life answer so many prayers. So many in the daily, so many in the yearly. And so I'm looking at this, and where I've landed sort of is well, we need a miracle on Metcalf. That's what we need. That's what we need. And so what I'm going to ask you is let's talk to Jesus about a miracle on Metcalf. Because frankly, I don't want to pull out of the church and see a liquor store every day. And if I have to see a gas station, I hope it's Casey's because I like their pizza. But I want you to know, my heart, it's not, I'm not going to lead you through, oh, guys, let's figure it out. Let's do a campaign. No, let's talk to Jesus. If we're supposed to get it, all that stuff will come in line. But right now, let's just see what happens at City Hall. Because we know the King. And I'm excited to see how he's going to show up. And what I would just encourage you guys to do, in your life and as a church, what we got to be is a body of people that can really live this way and not just talk about it. You see, Jesus was teaching the disciples. I don't ever leave you behind. You just failed to tell Satan to get behind you. And he blocked your view and you couldn't see me. There should never be a time in your life that you can't see Jesus. And if you're walking in the Spirit, it's clear as day Lord, we love you. We thank you for the good news of your word. We thank you for the battles we face and how they stretch us. I thank you for this group of people, Lord, that I get to go on this journey with. Your body. And I pray, Holy Spirit, whatever you have for the future of this church, that you would do a work as only you can. If we're supposed to have that land, Lord, that you would move in this whole transaction, that you would just stop what is happening and make a way. And if we're not supposed to have it, Lord, we don't want it. We know you're doing something in the church, and it's not dependent upon that ground across the street. It's dependent upon your power running through us. But Lord, we hear you saying some things that might involve that, so we're trying to recognize it. And we just pray and lay it before you with no fear. No fear of what may happen to it. Only faith in what has happened to us. Every head bowed, every eye closed. The altars will be open this morning. If you'd like to come and pray about something in your own life or the miracle on Metcalf, I invite you to do so.